I think every single person on this planet needs to be educated and re-educated about climate change. We are dedicated as the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change to embrace this education issue.
We can look into the eyes of our children, our grandchildren, and we can finally say, tell them that we have joined hands to bequeath a more habitable world.
L'accord de Paris pour le climat est accepté.
State Congress voted to ban abortion. Alternate universe located.
Global temperatures rise.
The effects on social media on Generation Z.
To avoid catastrophe, rising sea levels, and dying coral reefs, the epicenter of a global pandemic.
No exception for rape or incest.
So, good morning and welcome to the We Don't Have Time COP30 Climate Hub.
Yes, this is the third day of broadcasting from the United Nations Climate Summit here in Belém. And Belém is located at the edge of the Amazon rainforest. And the Amazon rainforest is one of the most impressive ecosystems of the world. And indeed, it hosts 1 out of 10 species of the world when it comes to animals, plants, insects, you name it. They're here in the Amazon. And also the Amazon, of course, sequesters and the forest holds massive amounts of carbon. So it is a very significant forest for the future of our planet and for the climate. So, Nick, any news from the ongoing negotiations?
Well, you know, it's still early days, but there's lots of things being announced, and it's very hard for us We Don't Have Time to actually track everything that's going on. Fortunately, we've got lots of partners, and one of those is Mission 2025. That's linked with Christiana Figueres, one of the architects of the Paris Agreement. And a couple of things I wanted to mention. There is something new, a new global investment fund called the Journey Fund, and that's helping governments to get off fossil fuels. And yesterday, it made its first investment in Latin America, $200 million for solar projects in Colombia. Now, this is important because Colombia is one of the first countries to sign the non-proliferation fossil fuel, I'm going to get it wrong, aren't I? The Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. And now they're starting to see some benefits from that. So this new investment fund, the Journey Fund, has chosen the country that is, committed to get out of fossil fuels, Colombia, by giving them this money for solar power. This is the beginning of something I think could be quite important.
That's great news. But we don't have time. We focus very much on amplifying science, as you probably are very well aware of by now. And this COP, we are partnering with the Planetary Science Pavilion. And the Planetary Science Pavilion is also helping us, of course, amplify the Our Make Science Great campaign. It's a great collaboration. So if you want to help us amplify science, go to our webpage and you can donate. And then you could get one of those caps, for instance, the red cap or the unique Brazilian cap that's behind us here. That is more in the Brazilian colors. Oops, dropping my script here. So this is really great, a great way of helping focus, helping us strengthen the focus on science at this COP and moving on. So what you can also do is join the bucket challenge. This is not just any bucket challenge. This is, of course, a bucket challenge focusing on science. So let's take a look at the latest what's happening in this bucket challenge. We have a great film on that.
Hello. Good morning, guys. Welcome. Have a great day.
Hola, everybody from COP30 Amazonia.
Science is the overall view that we need to share in order to take the best decisions all.
I think
science is important because it's one form of truth.
Today, as we stand in the world's largest rainforest, Amazonia in Belém, it is predicted by 2100 all the rainforests will be gone. Science is the key to solve this dispute.
I want to pass this off to Zoran Mamdani, the mayor-elect of New York City.
I pass the cup to the finest negotiators at the COP30.
I think we all, not just me, need to pass the cap to Mother Nature.
So, today's theme, we will be talking about tipping points. And there's some scary stuff when you listen to the scientists around the tipping points. And the tipping points is also the reason why we don't have time to wait, because we don't really know when we are triggering those tipping points. And when we do, it will be so much harder to solve the climate crisis, and things can really get out of hand very, very quickly. Luckily, we are still avoiding most of those tipping points, but we really need to change. I will give an introduction presentation that is focused not on the problematic tipping points, because there is also tipping points in our society, in our economy, that are good for us, that can work to solve the climate crisis. So this is really a race of triggering the right tipping points before we're hitting the bad tipping points. And I will start with explaining We Don't Have Time's role a little bit. We are the world's largest media platform for climate action. I founded this together with my co-founder, David Olson, 8 years ago after Donald Trump won the first US election. I realized that our world leaders will not solve the climate crisis, and we wanted to connect everyone in this space and get the volume up so that we can broadcast that, so that we can push that on other platforms to get more people on board. And today we gather more than 150,000 sustainable professionals on our platform. If you haven't downloaded our app, you can do so. Just go to Google Play or Apple App Store, search for We Don't Have Time. We're also very proud to work with more than 450 partners, everything from businesses, civil society organizations, and governments. And together, we push climate action to more than 200 million individuals. But here's the thing, and here's the big surprise. Our biggest fan is not climate activists. It's someone else. It's actually an oil company. And I will explain how I know this. I'm personally, and also We Don't Have Time, using LinkedIn a lot. Actually, I'm one of the most influential LinkedIn accounts in Sweden. So I have a great reach. And I often write about the energy transition and what's happening. And here's a post that I wrote about a very interesting coal auction in the United States, where there was hardly no one wanting to bid to it. The fact is the final bid was 99.9% lower compared to the previous oil auction that was 10 years before. So the market for coal has really collapsed. No matter what Donald Trump or others says, this market is old technology, people don't want it. And what's interesting with LinkedIn is that you can see who is reading the posts and how many you reach. And here you can see that I reached 147,000 people with its post. And I can go into the analytics and watch who is actually behind the screens. And as you can see here, number one is the oil company Shell. And this is not random. They are kind of stalking me. Every time I write about oil, energy transition, climate action, they appear in the statistic. Always. Every single time. As you see here, they're top 3 every single time. And this means that hundreds of people inside that company are seeing what I write. I think this is very interesting. And the question is really, why is that? Why is that an oil company takes so much time in reading the world's largest media platform for climate action, posts about the green transition? I think the answer to this is very simple. It's because we're ending the oil era, and the oil companies know this. This year, for the very first time, renewables surpassed coal, oil, and gas in the market. So clean energy is the winners and fossil fuel is starting to lose. And it's everywhere you look. In US last year, 96% of all new electricity were fossil-free. In Russia, there is actually a big financial crisis in the coal industry. They're a big provider of coal. It has lost 80% of value, and half of the businesses is near bankrupt today. And it's not only coal, it's a lot of technologies in clean tech that are scaling exponentially. Everything from solar, electric vehicle, batteries, all those curves are scaling exponentially. And exponential change is kind of hard to understand. So you really need to interpret in how fast this change is coming. And a good example is to do it with time. In 2004, it took a year to build 1 gigawatt of solar in the world. In 2010, it took under a month. In 2015, it just over a week. And 2023, it took a day. And last year, less than an hour. And here you can see the exponential graph of that. It took 68 years to build 1 terawatt of solar globally. After that, it took 2 years. This is amazing. So it's really a clean energy revolution going on. But solar has one disadvantage. If it's not shining, you can't capture the energy. So that's why we also need to store the energy. And storage is now scaling in many countries and is fastly replacing fossil gas and other solutions. And the stock market, the financial market knows this. Just this year, clean energy stocks outperformed all other stocks in the energy sector in Standard & Poor's 500. So if you invest in clean energy, you are the winner. And one winner that is very happy today, I know he's doing some oil businesses, but he's also doing a lot of good stuff in clean energy, is the president of Brazil that reached record high 88% renewable energy in the whole electricity grid. And this is a big country. So this is very impressive. And the good news with all this, it's leading to emission are starting to decrease. In EU, 2023, emissions were down 8%. In China, the emission, this is new report from Carbon Brief released yesterday, emission has flattened out past 18 months. The economy in China are growing, but the emissions are starting to fall. But it's not good enough. Of course not. We really need to cut emission in half according to science every single decade. And we're nowhere near that. But here's the thing. I'm super convinced after working almost 24 hours on the climate space that what's in the way is not that we don't have the solutions. It's not that we don't have enough people willing to do the change. No, it's that we have some special interest of old power in fossil fuel industry and their allies in politics that are now trying to stop us, trying everything they have to slow us down. If we remove that, this halving graph will happen. So we need to address that. And most people, they want this to happen. In fact, there's a new study saying 89% of people globally want stronger action from the climate leaders. But they're not getting it because they are too polite. Most people, they think they are alone in wanting stronger action. They think their neighbor don't want it because they read the news and they see the TV and they listen to the politicians. But the truth is, a majority wants climate action. They want stronger regulation. But they're not getting it because they're not loud enough. And that's why we have this CAP, Make Science Great Again. It's actually spreading like a hot potato here at the COP meeting. People really love it. And we're meaning it. I mean, Donald Trump, he is brilliant on marketing. So we have been inspired of a great slogan, and we are turning it into something else, turning it into defending science, promoting science, so that we will have science leading our society. And that's not really happening today, so we really need to do it. And it's because science is not just listened to, it's also under attack. According to concerned scientists in US, there have been more than 400 attacks on science just this year. That's a record high. So what we need to do is to help make science great again. And if we succeed with that, we will succeed with the green transition. But we need your help. If you're part of the 89%, stand up, speak up for science, speak up for climate. And a great way to do it is to wear our cap. And we have a special version here in Belém, that white version. You can get it by scanning the QR code below me. And you can become part of the change so that we don't hit the negative tipping points that we will hear from Tim Lenton just after me. Thank you so much.
So I should sit down across you or just no, stay steady.
We just heard a presentation from Ingmar Rensok about the Make Science Great campaign. And this is, of course, a beautiful campaign to prioritize, to promote the prioritization of independent science. And we're so lucky to have scientists here with us at the studio. And the first scientist here that is going to give us a keynote presentation is Tim Lenton. You are chair in climate change and earth system science at the University of Exeter. And you have a presentation for us. So the floor is yours, Tim Lenton.
Thanks very much, Katarina. Yeah, I'm here to talk about tipping points and the key messages from a global tipping points report that we put out actually at the pre-COP ministers meeting about a month ago to try and help influence in a constructive way the negotiations here. So the report is all about the Earth system tipping points that we're facing and the radical acceleration of action that we need. So I'll talk a little bit about the latest tipping point science, the challenge we're facing there, and what's required to activate what I call positive tipping points to accelerate change to zero emissions. So on the science, let me start by trying to explain the concept of a tipping point with a simple movie. This is a little movie of a system that I'm slowly forcing towards a tipping point. The system is it's the ball rolling round in the valley on the left, but there's another alternative stable state of the system, the valley on the right. And this system's being forced in a way that the initial state is getting less stable over time, and some amplifiers within the system are getting stronger and stronger. And the crucial thing at the tipping point is that those amplifiers are so strong they support a self-propelling change that in this case is quite abrupt and very hard to reverse, as you can see, as the ball rolls down the hill into the other state. So those are the important qualities of a tipping point. And there are a number of potential tipping points in the climate system. So sorry with my pressing the button too hard. Well, what we've done in the latest report is make this nice little summary graphic. It shows you in the thermometer that we're at about 1.4 degrees centigrade of global warming. And it shows you on the right a bunch of critical parts of our life support system, the Earth system, that risk being tipped into a much worse state by that global warming. And you can see that there's some uncertainty about exactly where the tipping point is. Some tipping points are closer than others, but a bunch of critical life support systems are already in the danger zone. And tragically, and I'll talk a bit more about a few of those, but tragically, one system, the world's tropical or warm water coral reefs, we say are now past a tipping point, because in the last 2 years, we've seen at 1.4 degrees of global warming, over 80% of those tropical reefs have been experiencing unprecedented dieback. So that's the first tipping point to be crossed. It's a critical one because about 500 million people depend on reefs for their livelihoods, and they provide, for example, critical coastal protection from storm surges to a lot of people living on the coastlines behind them. But as we look ahead, the latest science shows that the Amazon that we're gathered in here at the COP is at much greater risk of a tipping point than we thought, a tipping point towards a degraded savanna state of the system instead of a lush, moist rainforest. And that's because of the combined effects of climate change and global warming, which means together they could tip the Amazon below 2 degrees centigrade of global warming. That would be an issue for at least 100 million people living in the region, either directly in the Amazon or in the La Plata Basin to the south that would get profoundly drier if the rainforest collapses, and in the surrounding agricultural regions of Brazil, which would suffer really major declines in productivity if we lose the forest. But also globally, we're all going to know about it because losing the Amazon means losing carbon to the atmosphere and removing reflective cloud cover and amplifying global warming. Now, if we look ahead, the challenge continues because every fraction of a degree of warming is increasing the risk of crossing other, even more damaging tipping points. And unfortunately, those tipping points are kind of connected together in a way that tipping one thing can make tipping another more likely, or in the worst case, trigger tipping another. I put in the center of this diagram the great overturning circulation of the Atlantic Ocean because it is the great connector of the climate system. And we already see worrying evidence that it's slowing down, and we know it can tip into an alternative state. And if that happens, it will have ramifications, bringing forward tipping points in all kinds of other systems, including influencing the Amazon. So let me just focus a bit more on this great overturning circulation of the Atlantic. The red color is surface currents going up through the Atlantic, including crossing the North Atlantic in what we call the Gulf Stream. The blue flow is a return flow of saltier, colder water at depth down the Atlantic, thousands of meters down. And deep water formation either side of Greenland is the critical driver of this great overturning circulation. But we know it can be tipped off because that's happened many times in Earth's recent past. And we know it's at risk from the combination of global warming and the extra melt of the Greenland ice sheet and the extra fresh water that's pouring into the North Atlantic. That can stop this process of deep water formation on either side of Greenland, which is a crucial driver of the overturning. And if that happens, I just want to show you the risks that that will pose first for Europe and then for the world. Because in Europe, this tipping point happens in some climate models, including the one I'm showing you, at 2 degrees of global warming. And this is one of the best climate models there are. And what it does is it makes the climate of Europe radically different. In particular, the winters become, well, like living in an ice age. On the right, the picture is showing that the sea ice, the Arctic sea ice that currently is melting back, makes a spectacular comeback, and by February is nearly reaching the Thames estuary and covering the North Sea and most of the North Atlantic, which is why on the left you see some contours showing you what the decadal climate extreme is. It's like minus 20 degrees centigrade in London and 3 fully frozen months of the year. And yet the summers are going to be hotter than they are now in this 2 degree warmer world. So we have a radically more seasonal climate, and the infrastructure of the UK, where I come from, and many surrounding countries will be, well, profoundly challenged, and we won't be able to grow crops in the UK. So we'll have a huge challenge. But in the global picture, it's going to cause a catastrophe for food security and water security. So these maps basically show in purple massive reductions in the viable area for growing 2 major crops, wheat and maize, worldwide. Reductions by more than a half. So if this tipping point happens, it's a global food and water security crisis. And we should be doing everything in our power to stop those outcomes. And yet the window for preventing these damaging tipping points in the climate is rapidly closing. The only way we can really control this risk is to limit the overshoot of 1.5 degrees of global warming, limit the amount we go over in terms of temperature, and limit the number of years we go over. But the only way we're going to limit that overshoot is to spectacularly accelerate action to zero emissions, which is why we need what I'm going to call positive tipping points, which accelerate change in a self-propelling way to zero emissions. And I want to show you that there is some good news. We have seen the evidence that we're crossing positive tipping points in some countries and some sectors, and that's exactly what's required. And basically, clearly our governance institutions need to get on the case with these, both the tipping point risks in the climate, and work out the strategies to deal with those, especially the ones that can't be avoided, like the coral reefs. But also, governance has got a key role to play in enacting policies that bring forward the positive tipping points. So let's have a look at the concept here. We know we're in an unstable state of society and the economy, and that it's maintained to a degree. The valley is dug out by things like fossil fuel subsidies that maintain that status quo. But we can imagine, and we know there exists another stable state for the economy, powered by renewable energy, electrifying all the activities we can, and that's going to be happier and healthier and more profitable for all of us. But the question is, how can we shift the balance of feedback so we get out of the unsustainable state and into the sustainable one? The main message here is that actions are already showing that they can weaken what I'd call the damping processes that maintain the unsustainable state, and they can work with amplifying feedbacks to create a shift. Ultimately, a tipping point will happen towards sustainability. What kind of amplifying feedbacks are we talking about? We're talking about the fact that the more people who adopt clean technology, the more other people they can influence positively to adopt. We're talking about the fact that the more clean technology we make, like the more solar panels or batteries, the cheaper they get and the better they get, and therefore the more attractive to adopt they get. And that they've been making spectacular gains in terms of declining price and improving performance. Those are the amplifiers that can get strong enough to create this tipping point situation where change is self-propelling, like it's already been in a country like Norway, shown here, the market tipping from buying petrol and diesel cars in the brownie colours to battery electric vehicles in the green, just within a decade. Now, Norway passed a tipping point for EVs back in about 2012. We clearly need tipping points in lots of markets and lots of sectors. But in the Global Tipping Points report, we've summarized where a bunch of the key sectors are at. We see battery electric vehicles in Norway right up there, having gone past the tipping point. The Chinese market is already tipping to electric vehicles. This is a big deal because we're talking about 13% of greenhouse gas emissions just from road transport. Some other markets are further behind, but the crucial thing is, as a major market like China tips, it makes the technology better and cheaper for everyone. It brings forward the positive tipping point in the other markets. And there we also see some other crucial sectors, like in the electricity or power sector. We already think we're past the tipping point towards solar energy becoming dominant later this century. And that's because it's growing exponentially, and the number of solar panels installed, that capacity is doubling less than every 3 years. So there's a bunch more sectors that need to tip, and some of them are further away from tipping. But what we show in the report is not only where are they at, but what actions will it take to bring forward the positive tipping points. And there the message is really that the most effective policies to bring forward positive tipping are the ones that mandate the phase out of fossil fuel technologies and the phase in of clean technologies. So I'm talking about things like banning the petrol and diesel car sales in your market from 2035 onwards, banning diesel truck sales from 2040 onwards, banning gas boilers for heating from 2035. These policies will kickstart the innovation and activate the amplifiers that bring down the price, improve the quality of the clean technology for everybody. It would be great as well if governments would stop subsidizing the problem, fossil fuels, and also the meat sector. And that's what we also highlight here. Policies that reduce the kind of damping feedbacks that are currently holding in the status quo, they need to be changed. But together, those things clearly can positively tip major markets and major sectors because it's already happening. So to conclude, the overarching message is we're facing catastrophic risks with tipping points in the climate, we've got to phenomenally accelerate action in order to limit global warming, to minimize that overshoot of 1.5 degrees centigrade of global warming. That's the only way we're going to get these risks under control. But that in turn demands immediate, unprecedented action, both from the leaders here at COP30, but also leaders in all kinds of sectors like business and civil society, as we can all make choices about which diets we choose and which technologies we adopt. And if we adopt clean technology, we're helping make it better and cheaper and more attractive for the next person to adopt. So it's only with this combination of what you could call decisive policy action, but also bottom-up action from civil society, business, and the rest of it, that I think we can give us a credible grounds for hope to positively tip out of trouble. Thanks very much for listening.
Just moments ago, Professor Tim Lenton shared a quite harrowing presentation of the recent tipping point report. And here in the studio to share their insights and discuss more of the tipping point perspectives, we have some great guests, and we also have a great guest with us on Zoom. So Melanie McField, you are joining us via Zoom. You are Executive Director of Healthy Reefs for Healthy People. A warm welcome to our broadcast.
Thank
and
you.
Tim Lenton,
Great
of course, next to me here, that just presented. You are professor at Exeter University. And also we have Carlos Nobre, Earth Systems Scientist at the University of Sao Paulo. And you are also the co-chair of the Planetary Science Pavilion here at COP30. And next to you, we have Raquel Luna Viggiani, Executive Director, Instituto Arumana in Brazil. I might have mispronounced that a bit. My Portuguese is very bad. So, wonderful to have you here, and thank you very much, Tim, for that presentation. It is alarming. It really feels, you feel it in your bones when you see the statistics and the short window, the window closing. But there are also, as you've mentioned in your presentation, the positive tipping points that we will talk about here too. So, Melanie, I'm turning it to you now first. The tipping point report suggests that it may already be too late for the warm water coral reefs. As somebody who's very much immersed in this topic, do you see any hope for the reefs?
Yes, because I have hope that we will be able to reduce, the greenhouse gases to bring down climate to 1.2 at least. I mean, we can do this. It's not easy, but I think we have to be saying it more, like more and more the coral reef community, we've talked about all the other things we need to do, because within our toolkit for coral reef management, we have things like fully protected areas, reducing pollution, all of that, but we need to pull these emissions targets and the reduction of greenhouse gases into our toolkit. And having that more upfront, once we do that, yes, we have a chance for reefs. But if we just keep going along business as usual, it won't turn out well for reefs in almost all of the world. There may be a few places that survive, but yeah,
so Melanie,
for all those people, it's.
What will be the impact if we lose the reefs? What is the impact?
Well, it's like a third or a quarter of all marine life in the ocean, is dependent at some point in their life cycle on coral reefs. So, you're taking a chunk of biodiversity. So we don't even know, the potential pharmaceutical values of these things. That's for the entire planet. Then you look at the almost a billion people that are close proximity to reefs or somewhat dependent on reefs, that's their physical security. You know, land is being protected. Coastal properties are being protected by reefs. As they degrade, it takes a couple decades, but storms, they're literally their homes and their businesses, hotels will be washing away in the next typhoons and hurricanes. And then all the food that comes from the reef, the fisheries, you know, people are living, their food security is coming from these coral reefs. So yeah, it's serious living consequences for people and for all of that biodiversity and the wealth that is on the reefs. So these coral reefs are so wealthy in terms of, you know, the natural capital that's sitting there, and we may just allow it to go because it's below our target. That's
Thank
not
you very much,
acceptable.
Melanie, for spelling that out so loud and clear. So turning out to callers, you have been at the center of the work around the Amazon rainforest and its big, I mean, how important it is in the Earth system. So could you please tell us the Amazon's role in the wider world perspective, please?
Yes. Of course, I mean, the Amazon is the largest tropical forest on the planet. It evolved particularly over tens of millions of years. And the Amazon really creates a very efficient way to recycle water. About 40% of rainfall in the Amazon depends on this very effective water recycling. Near the end is 50% of water recycling. So that really creates a condition for a very large scale biodiversity evolution. So this is the largest biodiversity in the planet. We know more than 50,000 plants, 16,000 trees, 3,000 fluvial rivers, fish. So this is something, this ecological connectivity. And also this ecological connectivity is very important because the recycling of water, the Amazon exports 45% of all the water vapor that comes from the Amazon, from the Atlantic Ocean, by the trade winds. And then this recycling is so efficient, 45% is exported to the south of the Amazon. That is what maintains the tropical savanna south of the Amazon. 50% of rainfall in the tropical savanna depends on this, what we gave the name of flying rivers. And also 35% of rainfall in the Atlantic rainforest in the south depends on these flying rivers. And also, needless to say, the Amazon over tens of millions of years removed more than 600 billion tons of carbon dioxide. So it's stored in the soil and in the vegetation above the soil. And also this climate stability keeps the temperature. So all this carbon storage really reduced the global temperature 1.5 degrees. And also studies even start to show that the fact there's a lot of rainfall here even prevents atmospheric wave to cause a drought or a dry climate in California. So just to show this connectivity of the Amazon with the global climate.
Such a beautiful and intricate system, indeed. So, Carlos, how close are we to losing, to the tipping points of the Amazon?
Yes, Tim Lenton showed very well. You know, in my opinion, after coral reefs, the Amazon is one of the closest to the tipping point. Our studies show deforestation exceeds 20 to 25%. And global warming reached 2 degrees, no way. We are across the tipping point. We are very close to that, globally speaking. Deforestation is 17, 18%. 30% of the Amazon forest is several stages of degradation. And, you know, as Tim mentioned, the risk of reaching 2 degrees is very high if we don't reduce emissions very rapidly. So the Amazon is very close to tipping point, and all southern Amazon, Atlantic to Bolivia, 2.5 million square kilometers. The dry season is 4 to 5 weeks lengthier The dry season is 20-30% drier, 2-3 degrees warmer, increased tree mortality in southeastern Amazon, south of this state where we are now. The forest became a carbon source since 2010. So the Amazon is at the edge of a tipping point, and if really we cross the tipping point before 2100, we're going to release more than 250 billion tons of carbon dioxide. We're going to lose the largest biodiversity. We're going to generate a larger number of epidemics and even pandemics. And also, this recycle of water going to the south will turn the tropical savanna into a very, very semi-arid vegetation. So we are going to lose the largest biodiversity on the planet.
Thank you very much, Carlos. It's almost difficult to take in the consequences, to really realize it's so massive. So, Tim, we spoke now of the Amazon tipping points and the coral reef tipping points. What other Earth systems are at risk of tipping?
Well, as I touched on in the presentation, there are critical parts of the circulation of the ocean, especially in the Atlantic. They are definitely at risk of tipping, which would have catastrophic consequences in simple terms, not just for Northwest Europe, where I showed the kind of extraordinary winters and the incredible seasonality that would challenge all of our infrastructure, and I think, frankly, lead to large-scale displacement of people who would want to leave. But that tipping point would cause connected tipping points in the monsoons in the tropics, because when the Atlantic Ocean circulation, the overturning breaks, what happens is it stops transporting a lot of heat from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere. That moves up the great band of rainfall around the tropics south, and that's equivalent to severely disrupting or stopping monsoons in West Africa, in India, and that would be a humanitarian catastrophe. But also, if we see the Atlantic overturning circulation stop, it's going to leave heat behind in the Southern Ocean, which is the big risk to tipping points that are already at risk there for the West Antarctic ice sheet and parts of the East Antarctic ice sheet. We can't rule, well, again, we'd struggle to say that we're not very close to the tipping point, especially in West Antarctica, where the ice sheet is retreating at an accelerating rate. There's enough ice in West Antarctica to raise the sea levels worldwide by around 5 meters. About 250 million people live within the first meter of sea level rise. There's also a big risk to the Greenland ice sheet that we see shrinking at an accelerating rate. That holds enough ice to eventually raise the seas by 7 meters. Now, it may take many centuries for the complete breakdown of these ice sheets, but we'd be seeing accelerated sea level rise. And as Melanie explained, if we're losing the coral reefs, we're losing their protection of coastlines from the storm surges that are going to come on top of that sea level rise. So in a connected sense, it's a whole lot of escalating or cascading risks.
Thank you, Tim. I'd like to ask you just briefly to touch upon the social tipping points also, because if somebody might not have seen your presentation. So please tell us briefly about the social tipping points and what they entail.
The good ones, the positive ones, yeah. Because of course there can be negative ones, but the positive social tipping points they're all what's going on in the tipping point is all about amplification. It's all about the fact that a little change, maybe it's I choose to adopt an electric car or an electric scooter or an electric bike instead of a fossil fueled one, that incrementally makes the technology better and cheaper and more attractive for the next person to adopt. But I might also influence the next person to adopt, because I might say how great the electric vehicle is, and that might make them think, oh, I want one of those. So those are the kind of amplifiers that are actually crucial to creating positive tipping. But of course, lots of other actors, we say, like policymakers, can enact the policies in that case that will bring forward those positive tipping points. If a technology is at an early stage, we need public money to be invested in research and development that helps achieve these economies of scale, this learning by doing that makes those things better and cheaper and more attractive for all of us. But if the technology is close to being competitive, then we just need policymakers with the courage to phase out the old dirty fossil technology and phase in the new.
Indeed. So we all have a part to play in this tipping scheme. So Raquel, I'd like to turn to you now. You work a lot with vulnerable people and climate injustice in local communities. Can you give us some recent examples of how extreme weather, hot weather, recently have affected indigenous communities here in the Amazon?
Yes. So I have been working for about 17 years, working and living in traditional communities in the Amazon. And I think I was there during the biggest 2 droughts. Actually, there were 3 big droughts and 2 of the biggest floods. And I could definitely see and live how it affected local communities, who we call the guardians of the forest, but are actually being one of the most affected populations. I have many stories on how this affected them, but I don't know. I think there are different topics I could bring. The first of all is isolation. So most of these communities are only reached by boat and river transportation. And I've seen hundreds of the communities I work with completely in isolation, and it affects education. So the students cannot get to their schools. They cannot get water because it's too far away. And definitely on income generation. So whatever they produce, they cannot sell, and the food doesn't come in. So it affects also their how they access goods. And this you can see in many different ways. It also affects the production. So I work with communities that work with Brazil nuts, with cupuaçu. Just as a number, I'm afraid to give numbers because you're the numbers people, but one cooperative that had already planned for 20 tons of Brazil nut production during 2023 droughts, they were able to produce 3. So this is just like a little bit of what we see on the field. So whatever numbers and stories that seem to be far away, they're already really close by. And living the drought, it was also living the fires during 2023, 2024 that affect health and everything else. So directly affecting the population.
Thank you, Raquel. So what can be done to limit these economic effects for the indigenous peoples?
We are already talking about adaptation. So just for example, the community I live in, you only get by boat, and they work with community-based tourism, so sustainable tourism. They had to close for 3 months. So it's 3 months, actually 4 months from September to November, because you cannot get there. And this was like 4 months without income for the whole community. And what happened is that people started to buy motorbikes. So we're talking about adaptation. We're talking about you cannot do one way. We're already thinking of alternative ways of doing. So the motorbike is just like an example, but adaptation has to come in many, many forms. And when it comes to water, finding the solutions that work for each region to access potable water and so on.
Thank you very much, Rachel. I have a few questions left. We have about 6.5 minutes to go. So I'd like to address the topic of impact. I mean, in your work, you address decision makers and the public in various ways, but how can we, all of us, from different roles and perspectives, communicate to leaders the sense of urgency when it comes to the planetary, to Earth systems? What call to action can you have to all of us, regardless if you're a business leader or if you're a single mom or with not a high income, or regardless of who you are? How can we push? Because we all have a part to play in this, right? Raquel.
In my case, I work with advocacy, bringing the voice of the people from the field and telling these stories. I think this is a very powerful way to push. So we listen, we try to organize these adaptation plans, these adaptation proposals, and try to organize it in a way that you can actually influence decision makers. And at the same time, what you are bringing as scientists, I try to also do the other side of the communication. So bringing this to the local people, which is also very important.
Thank you, Nate. Thank you very much, Melanie. What is your call to action to pretty much all of us in pushing, maybe from your perspective, the coral reef, not to be able to save what can be saved?
Yeah, I think what Tim said about all the little things mattering, that's really important. So for people to think about the individual things each person can do. And I would just make a plug for, I'm not sure how widely it's known that the methane reductions give us a much quicker impact into the temperature. So for me, being in such a precarious position with coral reefs, I think the methane reductions is essential to get temperatures down in a time frame that will allow them to survive. So there's a methane treaty out there. Individuals can reduce beef and sheep. Those are the two foods that are just, off the charts in terms of the methane production. So if we could just do that, that would be a big step.
Thank you. We also have this campaign on We Don't Have Time called Buy More Time. And that's directed towards the methane, how we can address different aspects of reducing the methane emissions and plugging some of the leaks.
Switching subsidies. That's another, that's an easy, like a government can do that with a stroke of a pen, switch the subsidies. Like we need a good old switcheroo. Let's subsidize the good, foods that are trying to reduce the carbon footprint of what we eat. We need protein, but where it comes from makes a big difference.
Thank you. So Tim, you're nodding on the methane. What would you like to add in terms of call to action, what people can do?
Yeah, Melanie was spot on we emphasised that in the Global Tipping Points report. I talked about accelerating the reduction of the carbon dioxide emissions. We also rightly highlight that reduction of methane emissions, and we say we have to scale up what's called carbon removal, but particularly we're concerned with sustainable carbon removal from the atmosphere, which in simple terms, the big opportunity space will be regenerating nature in simple terms. But to do that, we need to address what Melanie's highlighted, which is we have to stop the net destruction of nature, including the Amazon, which is primarily driven by diet trends. But then when we get to the point, if we can create
as in beef, just to
as
clarify.
in beef for the Brazilian Amazon, that's the primary driver of Amazon loss. But then once we stop, if we can reduce the pressures that are still causing the net destruction of nature, then we create space literally to try to regenerate nature, to work with nature's feedback loops, to grow back healthier, more resilient ecosystems. And we've seen lots of localized examples where those, I call them positive tipping points for nature, have started to happen. We've seen initiatives like marine protected areas spread like wildfire across Pacific Islands because communities kind of own the initiative and they realize this is actually going to help us have a sustainable fishery. And then on the plus side, the evidence also shows, okay, the coral reefs are at risk, but if we can take the pressure off from overfishing, that's one of the key human pressures that could save some of those systems, just as, of course, taking off the key driver of Amazon deforestation would be one thing we can do to try and delay or prevent the tipping point of the Amazon. And again, so it comes down to people, because it's our diet choices, in this case, that's the big driver, but it's also communities that get engaged with their ecosystem to start to regenerate it when they realize the shared interest in regenerating their life support system.
Thank you, Tim. Carlos Nobre, you get the last word here this session. What can we do, all of us, to create more positive tipping points and stop the negative ones?
Yes, of course, Tim brought this issue for all the global tipping points. Let me just focus on the Amazon. We are trying to implement, not only scientists, but Raquel is showing positive tipping points on these communities to protect the forest, to maintain the forest, to develop a social bioeconomy of standing forests with the products of the social biodiversity. So this is essential. So positive tipping points, really, to save the Amazon, we have to get zero deforestation, degradation, and fires. Last year, we had a record-breaking number of fires. more than 95% of the fires, man-made fires, by organized crime. And also large-scale forest restoration. Brazil has, Colombia has, and also, of course, to give scale to this social bioeconomy of standing forests and valuing the knowledge of indigenous people. So we are really have to give scale, all positive tipping points. Big challenge. When you look at the politicians here in the Amazon, 80% of the politicians, elected politicians, are populist politicians who are not putting saving the Amazon as priority. So really, what we are proposing in Brazil is to create educational systems for children, to protect children, to mitigate all tipping points, and also adaptation. So I think this is our big challenge.
Well, thank you very much, Melanie, Raquel, Carlos, and Tim, for your marvelous work, your relentless work to really just do all you can and help us be better. And hopefully many people will watch this and take action in their respective fields. And of course, we need brave politicians, as you mentioned, Tim, to get this done. But this was truly inspiring and enlightening. So thank you very much, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.